Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. All righty, let's do this. So welcome, everyone, to the 5th SMAC webinar. This is so exciting. Thank you all for attending. Thank you for presenting. We appreciate all of you. So today's agenda, looking pretty fantastic. We've got a great lineup of MVPs, a lot of content to get to. So we're going to go ahead and drop right into the very first presentation, which is Jill and I are going to talk about creating a strong MVP application, because we have a lot of opinions about that and a lot of opinions about the ways that you can really set yourself up for success while you're going through this process. Of course, it's an incredible achievement. There's so many of you who've been through this process, so many of you know how it works, and you know that there's a lot that goes into it and a lot that has to happen to build the groundwork in order to create an application at all. But there's a couple of things that we think that you can do and a couple of things we think we can help with to bring a little bit of clarity to this process, because we also know that it can be a little bit opaque, and trying to guess at what everyone is looking for and what kind of information and how should you format it can be a little bit of a guessing game. So we wanted to just answer some questions and hopefully bring some clarity to the process.
Perfect. So first things first, I think to start out, I know there's been some confusion on this. When you are putting together your MVP application, you can be nominated by either a current MVP or by a current Sitecore employee, and would definitely encourage you guys to get some of those recommendations and have those submitted. They're really nice in terms of augmenting your application. So, obviously engaging with SMAC, we can certainly talk about that, or any Sitecore employees or current MVPs within the ecosystem, definitely reach out because you can leverage them for your application.
Absolutely. So with that in mind, we thought we'd just jump right into what makes a strong application. And this is largely based on both Jill and I were MVPs before we joined Sitecore, and they wouldn't let us be MVPs anymore. And now we're part of the team that not only mentors MVPs, but also evaluates the MVP application. So there's a couple of things that we have found over the last several years that we just think really help you in making your application stronger. And the first one is proof points. We need specifics in order to be able to evaluate the application. So it does need to be provable. Things that blog posts that have links, white papers that have links or references, it basically goes back to show your work, making sure that that's something we can very quickly evaluate. Customer case studies are always a bonus, again, with links. With links is going to be a very large through line of all of this. And make sure that as you're thinking through the application, there's questions, there's open-ended questions like, what are your objectives, and tell us about your accomplishments, and making sure that the answers to those are thoughtful and thorough. Also making sure that you have a blend of online activities, and this kind of comes back to because we're pretty regularly asked, like, well, how many do we need? And I think it generally comes back to just the more than one of each, definitely. Can't really be one or the other. That's definitely creates a weaker application. If you have a bunch of blogs and one speaking event, even that is better than having no speaking events at all. Making sure, again, that blend of online and offline activity is present. And then just to clarify, Sitecore specific is really what we're looking for. We absolutely love more general customer experience, more general experience with personalization and strategy and thought leadership. That's all amazing, but this is a Sitecore award, and we do evaluate it based on contributions to the Sitecore community, and that does mean that Sitecore specific content is really what we're looking for.
Yeah, and just to build on that point, it doesn't necessarily need to be Sitecore in the headline of the blog, right? You can write about customer experience or digital transformation, but somewhere in there, it should talk about the role that Sitecore plays, if that's going to be an article or something that you decide to put into the application.
Right. And I mean, please do. We know that a lot of, especially strategy MVPs, do a lot of general thought leadership. That's always great to see and great to have. But just keep in mind that because this is a Sitecore award, the Sitecore is what we're looking for. That's what triggers the, like, oh yeah, that goes into the bucket.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So next, in terms of social sharing, obviously participation in the community and activity on social is great and is huge and something that we encourage you to put into your applications. But just kind of some guidelines around this, we've seen a lot in a lot of applications where people will link to their Twitter, and it's just kind of a stream of just resharing or retweeting, right? There's no context, and it's great that you're promoting, someone else's content and trying to get eyes on that, but really we want what your perspective is. Hey, definitely check out this article because personalization is so powerful and Sitecore can help do it, or whatever it may be. So making sure to do that. As Jackie mentioned before, we need the proof point, so you don't have to save every single tweet that you put out there, but certainly a handful of them. And we'll talk about this a little later on as well, but you can start tracking now. The MVP application process has not changed, at least as far as I know, in the last 6 years. And so we kind of always know when it's going to come out. The structure is almost always the same. So throw up a OneNote or a notepad and just start saving a couple links to save yourselves time when the application process opens up. As I mentioned, retweeting alone is not sufficient. Make sure to tag people and add hashtags for visibility. Again, we are a community and we want to get other voices into that. So make sure that you're doing that from a Twitter perspective. And then LinkedIn, similar, right? It's easy to share content. And, I'm certainly guilty of this myself, but make sure to add content and your perspective to your shares, tag the people and hashtags for visibility to promote the conversation. In terms of GitHub, we know on the application form that it gives you an option to provide your profile. But if you haven't updated it, within the year for the evaluation, you don't need to include it. But if it is something that you're including, make sure that you do have some activity within the time period for the application. And then Slack, I think we get this question a lot. And we love the participation in all of the Slack channels and absolutely encourage it. But really active and consistent participation is key here. Having Slack and participating in the Slack conversations are two different things, right? So just making sure that you're taking part of that conversation, helping to solve problems that people are bringing up, answering questions, things like that.
Yep, absolutely. And we're going to start to go a little bit faster because I know that we're sort of running out of time, I can see, but I did want to, we've got a lot to get through. Again, blogs, we just wanted to provide a little bit more context because immediately after, 3+ blogs a year, people start asking questions about specifics, which is very reasonable. Absolutely, you can leverage your company blog. Just please make sure that you're given author credit in the byline. We have seen a lot of applications where people say, oh, I wrote this blog, and there's no way for us to evaluate whether they did write it because no author credit is given. Do use your own LinkedIn to post an article if you're like me and have no interest in building a website to host your blogs, which is totally valid. The LinkedIn articles function is super easy to use. And again, Sitecore specific content is a must. We'll be asking this throughout the webinar, but please do submit any blogs that you write to the SMAC newsletter. We're always looking to promote those and give those more visibility, and that can definitely help you out.
Awesome. Then in terms of presentations, a goal of 2 per year. I think obviously this year it's become easier, right? So you have to take advantage of virtual events, understanding that it's hard to apply to kind of bigger conferences, but there are user groups all around the globe that are constantly looking for speakers, and those count, right? So take advantage of that, repurpose content that was not accepted for symposium, let's say, turn it into a lightning talk for our SMAC webinars or a SUG. And then customer and internal presentations are not counted from the strategy perspective unless they're recorded and you're able to share them for a community benefit, right? It is part of our job within our organizations to have these conversations with customers, right? But if it is a knowledge sharing session that can benefit the community and be shared out, then we will consider it. Otherwise, it's not something that we'll take into consideration.
Right. Again, this is a community award, and that needs to be sort of top of mind at all times. All right, so just a couple of sort of general guidelines that we put together. This is really a summation of the other slides. Making sure that you're reaching out to Sitecore user groups. They're virtual now, almost all of them are. They often need speakers. Sometimes they schedule a year in advance. So definitely get in touch with them, start tracking your activity now, because as Jill mentioned, the application doesn't change significantly. And keep in mind that the process starts 12 months from the last application process. So if you had activity after you submitted it in November of 2020, you can definitely use that in November of 2021. Just keep in mind that not ever, like, you want to pick one year or the other, sort of pick a lane and stay in it for the year in question. Again, make sure that if you're providing links to a main corporate blog, that you have an author on there. And do ask for help. We're always happy to review. I reviewed several applications. I answered a bunch of questions before the MVP process, and also much earlier in the year last year, people reaching out saying, hey, what should I do? Do you think this is enough? Like, what direction should I go in? We're always happy to have those conversations.
Yeah, and the earlier you reach out, the more you can get involved with some of those Sitecore-led white papers. I know Jackie authored one this year, ebooks, other efforts that, then we definitely know. So definitely reach out both when you're trying to fill out your application, before submission, earlier on than that. And that takes me to the next point, ask for help in reviewing before submitting. We are always happy to look at it and say, hey, a couple more proof points here might be helpful. And then in terms of kind of the do's, make sure to space out the content throughout the year. We've seen a number of applications where it's just a whole lot of stuff in September. Which is great. We're happy that you're contributing, but, feel free to space that out a little bit more for the contributions throughout the year.
Yep. And in terms of the sort of don'ts, I think the really big one is, don't phone it in. We do know that, this is an intense process and it can get a little overwhelming, but please do give us thoughtful and thorough answers, provide all of the information that we ask for. Don't rest on your laurels. A past MVP award is not a guarantee of a continuing MVP award. We evaluate every application individually. We're like the Great British Bake Off in that way. We look back at the 1 year, not years past.
Yeah.
And if you do get a warning, which we have sent them out, please don't ignore it. We meant it. So please make sure that you take that to heart and are watching that. And if you have any questions about that, reach out. We're always happy to explain our logic and help you improve through the course of the next year.
Yep. And then I think lastly here, we've already talked about the links and whatnot. But to this point about working from home in the pandemic, listen, we've all done it. We've been doing it for, 13, 14 plus months now. It's not an excuse, right? We've, I think, all adapted to this virtual lifestyle. In terms of creating content. It's opened so many doors in terms of the virtual user groups and things like that. So we saw that a little bit last year, but moving forward, hopefully we're getting out of this, but it's certainly not an excuse at this point from an application standpoint.
Absolutely. And I'm getting messages that we need to speed it up. I'm sorry, we're just so into it. Not an excuse. Okay, so common questions that we get. What does evangelism really mean? That's a great question. It does mean being an advocate for the product publicly, and that means not just within your company or just talking to your customers, whether you're taking part in external marketing events, third-party events, writing and delivering thought leadership that promotes the value of Sitecore, possibly the technical how to do it, but also the value of doing it. Sharing the why behind those things is how we define evangelism.
Yep. And then the next question, we get this a ton, the difference between strategy and ambassador. And really this has to do with two components, community involvement and also work on the actual platform. Strategy MVPs are much more hands-on in terms of working with customers to execute the strategy, implementing goals, personalizing, testing, thought leadership around that. Ambassadors, have a different threshold where they're much more of a brand ambassador for Sitecore, and that usually means, the value of the activity might not be as quantifiable as what we're looking for, and they're not expected to be as visible in the community, but more so in the wider ecosystem. And they, this also might include, technical folks like a CTO or someone from a customer who's taking part in a detailed case study. For the sake of time, I'll stop there, but we can certainly elaborate on that if anyone has more questions.
Absolutely. We get this a lot as well. What about customer presentations and customer workshops? Those are nearly impossible for us to evaluate because they usually take place behind closed doors and under some form of an NDA. So we evaluate content based on how it contributes to the community, and those don't contribute to the community as a whole. Again, if there's a way for you to anonymize it and share it, white label it in some way, then it would count.
Perfect. And then in terms of Sitecore lunches, absolutely, we love them. Definitely go as much as possible. But if you present, that's really kind of what we want to see, and that presentation would count in the presentation column. But just regularly attending as a participant is great. Please do it, but it's not something that is really quantifiable for the application.
Attending conferences, that's amazing, and we absolutely can't wait to see you there when we can all get back into that. That is also probably part of your job, and you probably got a pretty sweet trip out of it. So if you just attended, or I don't want to say just attended because that's a big thing, but make sure that there's something that comes from that that contributes to community knowledge.
Yep, and then lastly, in terms of just a balance of activity, as Jackie mentioned before, definitely more than one. We gave some guidelines. 3 blogs a year sounds, it's doable, right? And 2 virtual presentations, and really just trying to kind of keep up that balance. And we can, certainly help with more tips and things like that. But definitely want to see a combination of online and offline activity within the application.
Yep. And it is definitely possible to outweigh one category with a huge splash in another. If you wrote, 10 really in-depth blog posts and a high-quality white paper, we're not going to penalize you for only presenting once. So there's a balance to all things. Okay, and if you have any questions, please reach out to the SMAC team. This is our official email, and also Jill and I have our own personal emails and LinkedIn, and we're always happy to talk. And I'm sorry that we took so much time. Yay, thank you.
All right, awesome. And now we're gonna hand it over to Hugo.
So hi everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So today we're gonna talk about the Sitecore Author Toolbox extension and how to make your contributors' life easier with this extension. Before we kick in, just a little bit about myself. So my name is Hugo Quaisse. I'm an MVP Technology 2021, first time this year. I'm working at Valtech France as a Sitecore Expertise Director. For the one who don't know Valtech, so it's a global platinum partner with 17 MVPs, more than 400 Sitecore developers. And if you want to reach out to me, the best channels will be Twitter, LinkedIn, and my GitHub accounts as well. So today's agenda. So first, I'm gonna explain what is Sitecore Author Toolbox. Then I'm gonna show you some of the key features that you can use for your contributors. I'm also gonna show you some UX and UI improvement that the extension brings into Sitecore. If I have time, I'm gonna do a quick demo so you can get a better feeling of it, and then just a conclusion at the end with the key takeaways. All right, so what is Sitecore Author Toolbox? So it's a free browser extension. It's available for Google Chrome and Microsoft Edge. You can download it from the Chrome Web Store, and it's super easy to install because it's just as simple as an extension. There is nothing to install into your Sitecore, so anyone can just install it and use it right away. The first release of the extension was pushed in December 2020, and this extension is compatible with Sitecore 8, any versions, 9 and 10 until the latest 10.1 versions. We are regularly pushing some updates every month, actually, and today we are at the version 6.2.4 to be exact, and that's the latest update. So what do you get with this extension? This extension will bring some new features for your contributors and developers as well. You can see on the right-hand side some of the features that can be enabled through the extension. I'm going to present some of them. But this is not just about features. This is also bringing some UX and UI improvement into Sitecore. Of course, the benefit of all of that and the goal is to improve the contributors' workflow and productivity by facilitating the repetitive actions that you can have in Sitecore, or just speeding up your process or navigation through Sitecore from the content editor until the experience editor. So let me highlight some of the key features. The first features that you can get with this extension is the live URL module. The live URL module will show on top of every Sitecore page the public link of this page. This public link is generated automatically from the item path, but of course this is highly custom configurable. So whether you are using display name or language embedding, you can configure all those aspects straight from the extension. So this is super useful because in Sitecore, if you want to reach the public page, you have to copy the path and append it to your domain, and then eventually reach out to your page. So here for each page, you will get this open this page link plus a status. This is the extension will check the status of the page, whether the page is available or not. So you can actually see from Sitecore if the page has been published. By default, it works with your CM server, but you can also enable CD servers and URL in the configuration options of the extension. Last but not least, if you have multiple sites on your Sitecore or working on different environments like staging, UAT, production, you can bundle all your configuration and share it as a JSON file with any of your team members. So it's pretty useful when you're working in a team and you don't want everyone to recreate the same configuration as you. That's the first module. The second module I would like to highlight today is the dynamic error messages module. So in Sitecore, by default, you have those red bullet when you have an error, like a warning or a validation error in Sitecore. You have to hover them to see the title and the exact error. So the extension will just get those errors and make them visible on top of your page. So you will have this bar that groups all the error in your item, and it will allow you to click on any error and navigate to the fields that trigger this error. The third module I would like to highlight today is the languages flags and version number. So the extension will automatically add some flags to your language list. So when you have to deal with a very long list of languages in Sitecore, then it's very easy actually to identify where you should click and where you can actually navigate to your language version. The second point is that the extension will highlight the number of versions and sort your list of languages from the version with the highest, bigger number of versions until the one who has eventually no versions. So again, it's very easy to navigate through your list and versions in Sitecore. Another cool features that you can get is the browser notifications. So when you install the extension for the first time, it will request some permissions in your browser to push some browser notifications. So once you accepted that, then every time you publish items or sites, you will get a browser notifications at the end of the process. Same when you rebuild indexes, you install a package, etc., etc. So again, it's very useful when you have to perform very long publishing operations. Sometimes it takes time. So you can actually do anything else that you have to do and wait to get this notification on your desktop when the process is over. So you don't have to wait and check check back and forth into Sitecore if it's done. Another feature is the instant search. So on the top header bar of Sitecore, you have this input field that will allow you to search across content and media library only. So again, this feature will give the ability to quickly scan your content and search for something. It will show you the path and the items icons straight from the result list. Another feature, very important feature, is the right to left support. So it's available for Arabic, Hebrew, Persian, Urdu, and Sindhi languages. It works in content editor fields. So when you have to type in some right to left languages, you don't have to deal with copy paste and wrong copy paste and typos, because everything is just native in Sitecore. The resume from where you left feature by default in Sitecore, when you refresh your Sitecore back office, it will just reload it to the Sitecore top item. So you have again to navigate through the page that you were editing. So sometimes it takes a long time to navigate through the content tree and get back to your page, or click, open all the items and sub-items. So the extension will just resume your session from where you left. It works also when you log out and log in into Sitecore. And the extension also allows an auto-expand feature. So when you click on the content tree, if the sub-items only have one result, it will just continue to open all the child items. All the URL in the back office are now shareable, meaning that the extension will add the item ID into the URL, the language, and the version. So everyone who have installed the extension can actually get your link and just see the same page as you. So it's very useful when you're working with a large team, QA team, or you need to share a specific item link into tickets, for instance, Jira tickets, something like that. So you don't have to give some extra information and search for it. You just click and you land on the right items in Sitecore. The favorite sidebar feature, you can favorite any items in Sitecore. The sidebar will be visible under the content tree. You can organize, delete, add, and manage your favorites straight from your main screen. This is more for advanced user, but the extensions also bring a syntax highlighter. So when you use the rich text editor, now every HTML, CSS, JavaScript code will be highlighted. You have an auto close HTML tags feature, so it's very useful for the people who doesn't really know HTML and CSS. It will highlight the code error, the tags error, and it also works with Scriben. And much more. There is way much more than just that. So character counter, L bar and tooltip, enhance quick info, workbox badge and notification, translate mode copy button, history button, launchpad tiles display, gravatar image, right click to open an experience editor. I just invite you to install the extension and test it by yourself, because there is many features in it. The second pillar is UX and UI improvements in Sitecore. The first one, well known, is the dark mode. So the extension brings the ability for the user to switch to a dark mode theme. So it can be activated manually or automatically if it's compatible with your OS. For instance, on the Mac system, you can just define to switch to a dark theme at night. So Sitecore will automatically switch to the dark theme at the same time that your OS system is switching. It works with content editor and experience editor. The second UX, big UX feature, it's a brand new theme for Sitecore, which is called experimental UI theme. So as you can see here on the screenshot, it's pretty much different than what you are used to having Sitecore. This theme is focused on the clean interface, just to provide the minimum to your contributors. So less is more. They can easily focus on content. You might ask, where is the ribbon? The ribbon is still here, but it's just hidden, and you can just show it, hide it with a click of a button or a shortcut. Everything is Retina display ready. So all the icons, the fonts, everything is neat on your screen, and everything is easy to edit and navigate through. So this is a feature available right now with the extension. I will demo this one very briefly just after this presentation. The media library enhancement. You have a new grid view, new list view, the media library. You also have a lightbox, so you can actually show your media items in full screen in Sitecore and navigate through it, download them, copy the path, and use them anywhere in Sitecore. You have also the ability to multi-upload files in the media library with native HTML5 drag and drop features. And you can also search in folder. So if you have a long list of media items, you can directly search for that straight from the folder. So it's very fast and very quick. And the last one I want to highlight is the new preview mode. So based on the existing preview mode in the content editor, the extension brings new, I would say, options. On top of the classic desktop view, you can now trigger a button and get a tablet view or mobile view. You can rotate the device, resize the device, and everything is real time. You don't have to refresh the view or refresh the back office for that. Yeah. Okay. So anyone who wants to get some additional information or even a private demo, just ping me on my Twitter. And just a few words to conclude. Privacy practices of these extensions. I think this is very important to highlight. The extension is not collected any data and will never collect data. It's an open source extension. The code is available on GitHub, so you can actually check the code and actually contribute if you want. I just want to give a big thanks to Assad, Sin, Subu, and Michael for helping me out with this extension and building new features with me and making them available for the community.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Hugo. And with that, Dave, we're going to pass off to you.
Hey, everybody, and thanks to the SMAC team for organizing the series. My job today is to take a quick look at Sitecore's recent acquisitions of 451 and Baxter. I'm going to do that very quickly, and I'm going to stop at the quarter hour, come hell or high water, so we'll see how far we get here. Very quickly to get started, a little background on me. I work at Horizontal Digital. I'm basically the head of sales here, based out of our US headquarters. We've got 15 offices around the world. Been a strategy MVP for a few years, and I also sit on Sitecore's Partner Advisory Council. I work a lot in the financial services and healthcare spaces, along with some manufacturing and other cool stuff. Let's jump, though, in the interest of time, right into these acquisitions. So a few months back, when Sitecore announced that they were getting this huge infusion of capital, a lot of us were speculating about what they were actually going to do with that money, and because those decisions were really potentially going to reveal a lot about Sitecore's broader product roadmap and their go-to-market strategy. And so when they announced Baxter and 451 as the first big steps forward with those funds, it really did, for us, lay that strategy clear. And for us, it's also representative of what we see as a broader industry trend. And so if you've been in the Sitecore ecosystem for as long as I have, you're going to remember that once upon a time, Sitecore's value proposition was very much about the experience platform as its core product being built more or less from the ground up as a single kind of all-in-one solution, very monolithic in nature. And the whole point at the time was to provide your CMS and your automation, your analytics, and your personalization and testing in a single platform. Because at the time, you could go out and buy all those things separately, but getting separate tools to work together as a unit was, and frankly still can be, extremely difficult. And so the idea was having many or most of those experience capabilities native in a single monolithic platform was really going to ensure that businesses could readily actually use all of them, rather than spending years and years and millions of dollars on complex integration programs over time. So of course, you fast forward to today and everything has changed. You've got API-driven solutions, you've got microservices architecture, you've got SMAC, which has drastically reduced the complexity of getting any two given systems to talk to one another. And so that's really what they're purpose-built to do these days. So this idea of monolithic solutions is really kind of fading off into the distance, and this idea of product suites is coming forward, decoupled headless solutions intended that very specifically to play nicely together. And Content Hub, as you all know, was Sitecore's first foray really into that paradigm. And you've all seen, presumably, how that has exploded on the market, even outside the context of Sitecore's legacy product experience platform and so on. Content Hub is catching fire well outside of anyone that uses, experience platform. And so adding Baxter and 451 to the mix really creates a trend now. 3 is a trend. You've got 3 of these solutions that are cloud native, that are API first, that are microservices driven, that are headless in nature. And so you see where they're headed as a business in terms of not obligating clients to buy this huge stack as a massive solution of capabilities. And that's obviously where the market is headed, and it's really great to see that Sitecore's positioning that way. And meanwhile, the specific acquisitions close some pretty significant capability gaps in the legacy products. We'll talk about in a minute. 451 is very much focused on the B2B commerce feature set that Experience Commerce absolutely does not have. Baxter, in some ways, is sort of like a supercharged version of XTB. So let's take a quick look at 451. Again, B2B commerce offering. They happen to be headquartered down the street from us. In fact, I'm having coffee with Sitecore's new president of commerce, who's the founder of Baxter, tomorrow. I'm sorry, 451. And 451's current offering is called Order Cloud. It's designed to support primarily B2B, although it supports B2B to X and it supports B2C in theory. Whereas you contrast that with Sitecore Experience Commerce, which does fine in some B2C scenarios, but really requires a great deal of customization if you wanted to support B2B. And again, 451 is following mock principles and are, as such, really purpose-built for integration with other systems. And while it is truly headless by design, they do have an accelerator available with basic UIs for commerce administrators and for supplier self-service and for buyers. I won't spend a lot of time on client examples. They do have some case studies as part of the enablement that's available today for a number of B2B scenarios. So things like if you're onboarding B2B commerce for the first time, or if you're establishing a multi-party B2B marketplace with a central selling facility that connects buyers to a variety of sellers, if you have multi-brand solutions, those kinds of things. All of these use cases are supported. There's case studies behind all of them, and that's readily available to you. And I can certainly help connect you with people who can provide that information. At its core, 451 really orients around very classic and typical B2B concepts. You have this idea of your three different personas, buyer, seller, supplier. You have whatever it is that's being sold and the way that the taxonomy is organized around those products, and then you have the concept of orders. Orders, of course, being not just a purchase of an item, but things like returns and recurring purchases and custom pricing that are client-specific and exchanges and you name it. So it's pretty standard in that sense. It has some product information management capabilities, or PIM, but it also can and does integrate with external PIM and or ERP. The use cases that I'm working on with 451 right now involve clients that already have ERP in place, and in one case, they already have PIM, in another case, they don't. So the flexibility involved in being able to sort of mix and match 451's capabilities with other pieces of the stack that might already be in place, pretty interesting and very helpful. It's a pretty strong logical foundation, and so your time to value, I think, given the headless nature of it, is going to be far better than what you might see in legacy platforms. This is a really quick summary of the APIs that they make available. Don't ask me questions about APIs, but you can kind of see the general concepts that I just ran through. On the right side, you've got the persona groups. On the left, you've got kind of the experience-related components of the API. And in the middle are the ones that are sort of related to products and how orders are managed. And so this is where you would wire up to your ERP, your PIM, and so on. And sorry, I'm flying through this in the interest of time. I was in a pitch with 451 the other day, and one thing that was really interesting that they shared was this kind of framework of what they see as how an implementation goes down, kind of the level of dev effort required for different components of the solution delivery. I've never seen something like that before from Sitecore, and so I thought it was kind of interesting how they position the dev effort. So we're going to be using this as a point of reference from our standpoint. I've already got some questions of my own, frankly, about how they approach this, but it's an interesting concept to explore. For those of you who haven't already, obviously, there is enablement available. If you're a partner, then you go to SPN. If you're not a partner, then you have other channels to go through to get access to the enablement resources that are out there. There is not a certification yet, at least not that I've been made aware of, but presumably there's going to be. That's the last I heard from Rob Hufstetler, but that's coming soon. What we're watching for with these guys is sort of the future of the brand relative to Experience Commerce and how they position the respective roadmaps of those products and how they eventually directly integrate with other parts of Sitecore's product suite. The certification program that I mentioned is obviously, and then also hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll have some case studies that you can bring forward to clients, or you can apply to your own use cases that reflect the integration of Order Cloud with other pieces of the Sitecore product suite. I'm going to do a very quick run through of Baxter in the interest of time, so I can make sure that Chris has got his window here. So again, why Baxter relative to anything else Sitecore could have bought? This to me puts Sitecore's omni-channel strategy on steroids. It's sort of like for real this time, whereas, you know, as a seller, we can talk about how you could potentially leverage XDB as part of an omni-channel solution, but it doesn't necessarily do all of those things in the way that Baxter could immediately do. So similarly, calling Baxter CDP is kind of like calling Content Hub a dam. Yes, CDP is sort of at the core of what Baxter does, but it does quite a bit of other things. It has decisioning, it has experimentation, testing. And so we see scenarios here potentially where clients can consolidate functions that they today might be managing out of separate systems, leveraging CDP over here and a testing platform over there and a decisioning science platform over here. You can kind of mash that up a bit. They structure their capabilities in these core feature sets, the CDP itself for the data management, and then the experimentation, the decisioning experiences. Again, in the interest of time, I won't go through a lot of this in detail. Baxter does have a fair amount of enablement material, including a certification available through SPN for partners. And so if you haven't gone through those materials, they say it's 12 hours worth. I got through it about 2-ish. So if you have any background at all in personalization, testing, CDP, analytics in general, you're going to find a lot of the principles and themes that you see in Baxter's enablement pretty simple. And then similarly to 451, kind of what we're looking at and watching for is what's happening to XDB relative to Baxter, and particularly not just in the context of Sitecore's own product roadmap and where they're heading with those capabilities that in some ways overlap, but also how you think about how you yourself are working with those technologies today, and or how you might be advising clients on their own roadmaps. So if I'm thinking about a client that is brand new to Sitecore and thinking about wanting to get into personalization, leveraging XDB, one of the questions I might ask is now a good time to talk about Baxter relative to XDB and whether we're going to bring those two things together or address it through one or the other. And similarly, if on the other side of the fence, if I'm an existing legacy Sitecore client who's been using XDB for a long time and I have a very well thought out and well architected set of personalization tactics that are being driven through XDB, then what does that mean for me in terms of how I continue to advance that roadmap relative to capabilities that I might want to expose through Baxter, either in addition to or instead of what's out there in XDB. So in the interest of time, I'll wrap it up again, just letting folks know that there is certification available out there. The enablement material is very straightforward, easy to get through. Highly encourage people to take a look at it. It's a pretty interesting piece of equipment, and I think many of Sitecore's existing clients should be looking at it sooner rather than later. So I'll wrap up there. Sorry to rush.
Excellent. No, thank you, Dave. Great rushing. Well done. All right, we are going to hand it off to you, Chris.
So short introduction, and thanks, Dave, for giving me some time here. I am a two-time Sitecore MVP. I worked at Sitecore for about 7 years previous in SBOSS. So I am a data-driven marketer as opposed to a sort of a CMS-oriented person. Currently I work as a digital consultant, a digital and data consultant, and I'm a co-founder of a company called Relevant Edge. So what brings me here today is that I have a really keen interest in the idea of using data to measure and improve results. I think there's a lot of tools out there that let you execute like personalization, testing, but really what companies are trying to do is measure and improve results. So I've been really attracted to this idea of using data to do that. And what really has interested me more recently is the idea of the data that you can use in Sitecore to let's say take things to the next level to measure, optimize, and grow results. So if we think about it, Sitecore solutions are loaded with a lot of great data. And what kind of data might that be? Hang on a second here. Just want to get make sure I am showing the presentation here. This guy. So there is experience data. Experience data in XDB, as you're familiar with. The XDB is a content-centric or contact-centric data model. So there are a variety of types of data that are collected in XDB in terms of contacts, visits, pages, channels, A/B tests, personalization, profiles, patterns, and things that you might not realize that are collected in XDB, inbound URLs with complete query strings. And of course, there's a lot of solutions out there that need to work with server-side data. So there are likely custom data in the form of custom contact facets and even custom outcome data. And that data may be PII data, and that has an impact on what you can do with the data. There's also content data. And if you think about it in Sitecore, you have the content tree that defines pages, and it defines content structure for sites and subsites and groups of pages. Typically these are built up, as you know, using templates, renderings, fields, defining, the content categories, event categories. And then there's also, and I'm thinking about the master database here, but there are also other databases in the system with regard to Sitecore users and publishing events. So there's rich data there as well in Sitecore platform and in many Sitecore solutions. And then of course, there's also integrated data. So think about vertical applications where, banking, airline, hospitality, B2B, where there may be integrated CRM data, portal data, and then of course there are very often analytics providers like Google Analytics and similar, and data providers where a bank might be reading pricing information or financial information from a back-end source, or weather data for another type of portal solution, et cetera. So there's a rich variety of data available. And then of course, it doesn't stop there. There's, the new acquisitions that Dave just talked about. Now there's data sources there, and EXM, form data, et cetera. So Sitecore solutions are loaded with great data, as a customer experience platform. You might not recognize it because a lot of the data is not serviced in a way that's really actionable. But what if you could do that? What if you could take Sitecore data to the next level and think about, using real-time data integration? How might you do that? So think about, these different types of data that I just talked about. And what if you could unify the data from these different databases into one single unified data model, where you're weaving and stitching data together so that you're able to understand across different dimensions of insights, as I'm going to talk about in a second. But if you could join that data, load it into a standalone database using a kind of a mock-based architecture, and then make that data available to tools where you can visualize and take action on the data. And BI is an obvious choice for that. Power BI is also an obvious choice within that, but it could be any BI data tool. So if you're able to do that, then you are able to, get more business value out of the data collected in the Sitecore platform. And some of that data may well be proprietary PII-based data, and your choices are limited on how you can actually work with that data in different types of analytics tools. So in a way, this is like a headless BI or analytics solution for Sitecore, you could say. So with that in mind, let me just show a little bit about some of the possibilities. And what I have here, as I'm showing on the screen, is a dashboard that has been built using Power BI. So I've got a dashboard here, and I've got data dimensions on the right-hand side. So if we take a closer look at the dashboard first, and then I want to look at how to build up the dashboard. So here in this dashboard, we have multi-site and sub-site overview using demo data, anonymized data. So we have insights along the top, new users, returning users, transactions, and notice that there's trend information. It's green if it's up, it's red if it's down, and looking at the previous period that we're comparing to. We have here filtering by site and sub-site, and of course this is BI, so it's all about filtered insights, which I can do here, filtering by sites and filtering by sub-sites, which is not something that you typically find that you can do using, let's say, native Sitecore data. We have different types of KPI dials, and then if I scroll down a bit here, you can see that we have some really interesting types of insights, all built with data collected in Sitecore. So we have pages, entry pages, we have patterns that are matched, we have inbound URLs. The query strings contain UTMs. That's all stored in XDB. You might not know it, but that's the case. So you can actually make that data available in a BI tool if you wanted to do that. You can do things as you do in BI. You can create funnels and use goals and outcomes to create funnels. So I can do things like I want to understand, the performance of a particular page. When I choose a page, the other visualizations filter so that I can get those kind of insights. I want to understand, how does a pattern, which pages are used for when certain patterns are triggered, which campaigns are triggered for certain certain patterns, you're able to do that. I want to understand things like what pages, what patterns, what campaigns bring people into my lead funnel, so I can choose like the top event that brings people into the funnel, and I can get to understand those campaigns. So this idea of filtered data using filtered insights using data from Sitecore. Here I'm using some real simple data. It could be A/B testing, it could be personalization events, it can be contact facet information, custom facet data, etc. All of that data is available over in the dimensions and fields. So here I'm going to choose this graph showing visits by a day and revenue laid in over that on a bar chart. And what we see over here on the right is the different dimensions of data that are read in from Sitecore, the different databases unified in the BI database model, and then made available here. So there are of course contact dimensions to work with. Within each of these dimensions, there's a number of fields, and you're able to do things like data transformation, where you have every contact ID. You can count the number of contacts. You can figure out based on the visit behavior of contacts. Are they new? Are they returning? And you can do things like use calculated fields to understand the number in returning from the previous period or new in the previous period. So if we look down the different dimensions here, you see that there's data that's stored in contacts. Contacts, they trigger profiles, they trigger patterns. That's stored in XDB. You're able to service that. Custom contact facet data lists something in Sitecore, A/B tests, personalization events, page view events. Viewing a page in Sitecore is actually an event. And if I want to do things like model the different subsites in my Sitecore content tree, you have access to, as I mentioned before, page names, paths, folders, folder depth, templates that are used to build different types of pages in the system, as well as events as well. So you have a rich amount of data, the visits by start date, end date, location, device, pattern matches, query strings, as I mentioned before, and then custom data that might be stored in outcomes. So using the data that's available through Sitecore, loaded into the database, made available in the BI tool, you're able to create different types of visualizations. Another example, I'll just show one more here, just to give a flavor. So one of the things that I'd be interested in as a type of SBOSS, DX experience optimization person is, which pages do I want to focus on to optimize based on the segments that I'm interested in, based on the objective of the website. So here we see a scatter chart where you have the number of visits on the left, we have engagement value along the bottom. Within here, I have my pages, and the size of the pages is based on the number of page view events. So I can see my pages that perform well, and I see my long tail. Then I can do things like, let me filter my page and my page performance by individuals who've triggered a particular goal, and perhaps also triggered a particular campaign, and maybe triggered a particular pattern. Then this gives me insights into the different pages that I might want to focus on in terms of targeting these different segments. So this idea of the filtering based on the data that's coming from Sitecore events is quite powerful, and really something I think you can take to the next level. And here I'm showing the same chart where instead of using engagement value, I'm using page view event. So this is a nice way to sort of raise the level of the business value of the Sitecore implementation, bring users who are familiar with traditional analytics, get them to understand the value of using different data sources from Sitecore, and you'd be able to do things like join data from Content Hub and Sitecore Experience Manager, XM, and something that's quite possible is using Boxever and 451 as data sources. So that's a quick demo. I have one more slide I'm just going to quickly throw up here, since I'm the last guy who's squeezed. just quickly go through this. A bit about the why you'd want to do this. As I talked about before, measuring and improving results, enabling stakeholders to collaborate in a tool like Office 365 using Power BI, for example, although it could be another BI tool. Working with the kind of data that is proprietary to an implementation, maybe it's PII data, server-side data for more complex Sitecore implementations where server-side data is a must. And then, of course, yeah, it's the ability to use the data for deep insights as well as daily driver types of insights. So with that, let me hand it back. I know we're 1 minute over, but I just want to say thanks to everyone for joining and thanks for organizing.
Thank you very much, Chris. Sounds good. Thank you very much. And with that, we're going to go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you, everyone, for joining. If you have questions, please submit them. And also, don't forget to hand in those newsletters for the articles for the newsletters. Thank you, everyone.